do not use a site called Trading Economics. Okay, please, just cross it out. Because I don't find it to be credible. You can get data easily, but please use the World Bank, more credible sources, like World Bank. This is probably the best. IMF, International Monetary Fund, of course you have your, what's the other one, BLS. That's the one on, of course, Economic Bureau of Economic Analysis. Yeah. BLS is the one that compute the unemployment rate. So, in other words, if you use an applied project, right, you have to compile some data, and the data has to come from credible sources. I do not find Trading Economics to be a reliable source over the years. So, anyway, talking about central bank, okay, of the United States, the name is Federal Reserve Bank. So there are two responsibilities. One is the formulate monetary policy, which is what we study today. Second thing is the second responsibility or function is to monitor the regulation in the financial market. As you know, financial market is highly regulated. It has to be, just like the insurance market. So otherwise, when we have a financial crisis, there's no way the government could control the economy and try to correct anything. So they have to have some control. And the way they control it is by two things: money supply and interest rate, which is very close to our heart, especially the interest rate. Okay, what is the history of this one I'm going to go over quickly because you could read this on your own. I'm trying to explain the part that are difficult, complicated, like apply more. Anyway, it was founded in 1913, and the main mission of the Federal Reserve Bank is, there are three of them. One is to make sure that there is economic growth in terms of GDP growth. It is low inflation and stable financial markets. So in the past, we've taken students to Federal Reserve Bank. This is the structures here. So there are 12 of them in the United States, and we call it regional banks. You see the number 12 all the way. In fact, if you look at your dollar bill, you can see certain numbers start with certain series. It means it came from certain regional Federal Reserve Bank. Which is the one that's closest to us? This is Pembroke, North Carolina. That will be 5, you're right, which is headquartered in Richmond. And we have taken a group of students there 2 years ago during springtime, yeah. And last year, is that last year? This past spring, we took students to Federal Reserve Bank in Atlanta. It was about 5 hours. It's one day trip. Leave early in the morning and come back like midnight. So, and they have pretty good museum there. The one in Atlanta. The one in Richmond is kind of like so-so. And of course, we also visited Jimmy Carter's museum. So that's the kind of thing we do for our students. So next spring, we will organize another one. I don't know where we're going. I've been to the one in Chicago. The museum is so-so, not as good as the Atlanta one. I've been to the one in San Francisco. However, the day that I was there, I didn't get to see it because the security was so tight. I may have told you the story. We saw all the machines on, It was another professor, and that was during the day that this financial crisis began, that day. Yeah, it was September 11, 2009. Not the terrorist attack, but the financial crisis happened to be also on around September 11, September 13 of 2008, yes. I was at the airport and we were going to San Francisco, and then when we got there, one of the colleagues told me, well, I like to go see the Federal Reserve Bank in San Francisco. So we walked down several blocks to get there, and then when we got there, you say, oh, whoa, it's not very user-friendly, You have to make appointment. And, well, they're all like that. They all have very tight security with cameras everywhere. In certain parts you could see, certain parts you cannot see. Certain parts you could take pictures, certain parts you cannot take pictures. So, I visited the central bank in England as well. when I was there, I think it was last year in London. And they are very impressive. They have a museum that's, the museum is interesting because it shows you historically what are some of the objects people use, you know, in various cultures as money. So, come back to the structure very quickly. So there are 12 of them. Regional Federal Reserve Bank. So if you're an economic student, you want to do internship with us, we send you to Federal Reserve Bank, like in Charlotte or Richmond is a little bit too far. I think Charlotte will be the closest one. Okay, so what they do is they look at the economic conditions in the region, and then they provide guidance, you know, the guidelines as to how to set the interest rate. Okay, they are set up by Board of Governors, and there are 7 of them appointed by the president for 14-year term, pretty long time. But then out of this, they select one to be a chair for a 4-year term. Does anybody know who is the current chair of the Federal Reserve Bank?
No.
Is that a he or she? At least you can answer that question, 50-50, toss your coin.
He.
Huh? It's a she. I know. You clicked the wrong side, right? It's a head, not the tail. Janet Yellen. Who was that before? Anybody remember?
It was a he.
I hope you know. Look at your textbook. He wrote your textbook. Yes, he did. The macroeconomics part. What's his first name? Oh, not me, yeah. Excuse me. I compiled the book, but the original author is Ben Bernanke. And before him, very famous guy. Robert, you might know. I know I put you on the spot. Okay, his first name is Alan. No? Okay. How about G, like green?
Greenspan.
Yes, I'm sure you heard of that name. He has served at least 4 presidents. And then before that, there's another guy before that. Okay, I know. Do they show his picture on this textbook? Take a look, because in the previous textbook they show his name. I met this guy, Paul Volcker. I mean, I'm sorry, yeah. And when I say I met this guy, you think, how old am I, you know? I was a junior economist in Taiwan, and he was. See, those people are very famous, you know. Once your term is up, you know, you're very popular internationally. All the countries who want to grab you and come give a talk, and I say, oh yeah, we got the former, what do they call, Federal Reserve Bank chair here. So I went to listen to his talk when I was in Taiwan. That was in the late 80s. And this guy is about 7 foot tall. He's a giant, huge guy, chain smoker. Famous for that, yeah. Doesn't textbook show his picture anymore? This must be a later edition that maybe they don't show it anymore. 2001 version show his picture. Anyway, so, and then Alan Greenspan served for many years. They have secret service, you know, just like the president, like Clinton, you know. When he came the other day, he saw all the secret service. So this guys too. Even after they become, you know, I mean, they're no longer the, what do you call, the Federal Reserve Bank, the chair, they still have the secret service, yeah. So, and then it was Ben Bernanke, and today is Janet Yellen. Janet Yellen happened to marry a guy who is an economist. Her husband's name is George Akerlof. He's famous for Lemon's model in microeconomics. So Nobel Prize winner in economics. So this is all the top guys. Okay, so this is all the famous people. And then you have a committee known as FOMC. It stands for Federal Open Market Committee. Remember that OMO, Open Market Operation, buying and selling of bonds, that operation we were talking about? Okay, so this committee does that. Okay, it review economic condition and set monetary policy. What is monetary policy? And one of them was this open market operation, the buying and selling of bonds. Remember that? And this is going to be important for this chapter. We did that not long ago. Okay, what are some of the, what's the main role of Federal Reserve Bank? Now remember we had Great Depression, right? 1929 to 33. So what happened during that then? So there was a problem. You saw the pictures like the banks were not able to meet the demand of the depositor because remember when you practice this fractional reserve banking system, you set aside some amount. Well, they didn't expect people to come back next day withdraw everything, right? Because you have loaned it out to consumers for computer loans, car loans, mortgages, things like that. So what happened back then was during the Great Depression, people were trying to withdraw money, and so many economy was already failing. So a lot of them wanted to withdraw their money, and it was none because it has already been withdrawn by a lot of people. So when they come back and say nothing, so therefore the bank became what we call bankrupt. So when that happened, we call that banking panics. That was during the Great Depression. Okay, and during this Great Recession, we did not have that. Thank God we didn't have that, because like I told you before that, the branch or this discipline of macroeconomics became popular right after the Great Depression, because then they realized that, whoa, we really should have done better, to prevent this from happening. So we learn from painful lessons from history. So people attempt to withdraw the fund, and bank did not have enough because it practiced fractional reserve banking system. So then the banks failed, and then depositors lost their confidence, and then additional failure. Okay, so this is the same thing basically. So then what they were trying to do since then is they come up with some new policy, which you see soon on my slide too. And so one of the ways for the Federal Reserve Bank to try to prevent bank panics is by more monitoring, more supervision, more regulation. Some people hate to hear that word, but that's what they have to do. And even act as what we call the big daddy, like lender of last resort. I'm your big daddy, if you need money. Talking about commercial banks like BB&T, Wells Fargo, whatever bank you have, Bank of America, a lot of time they need money, they need loans too. So who do they go to? They go to their central bank. So what we call Big Daddy. Okay, so we already knew that. They did not prevent that. And that's how this came about, this whole branch of so-called macroeconomics. Okay, and then it described further what happened. So I'm not going to go through this in detail, but basically, you guys already know, and we talked about it earlier, how Great Depression happened. And one of the phenomenon of what happened during Great Depression was the money supply actually dropped. And that's important. So we'll talk about it very soon. So didn't have money, close the bank, and there were two things that were important. Remember we talked about that RD ratio? Okay, how many of you remember the money supply equation? Look back and tell me. See if you, because this is important to talk about this. Remember money supply equals to something plus something? So go back to your chapter on money market. I think that was, what was that, 7? Chapter 8? So what is money supply?
Currency held.
Okay, very good. Currency held by the public. And?
Bank deposit.
Remember this one? That you did an in-class exercise? Class?
Bank deposit.
Okay, bank deposit is bank reserve divided by the RD ratio. This whole term is known as bank deposit, okay? So this is a review. And remember we talked about the money multiplier, anybody remember? What is that equation? You get it out from some of these terms here. So that would be 1 divided by
1
the RD ratio, yes. So this guy is very important, star. In fact, that's the most important one. Because, this one is all right, you add 100 to it. Remember we talked about that. But then, whatever money that you withdraw from the ATM machine, it has an effect on the money supply through that multiplier effect. To you, it's nothing. You say, oh yeah, I just withdraw 100. I just put back 100. But then to bank, the change is 5 times. Remember the multiplier effect. Okay. Let's look at this number here. Okay. So if you look at this number, currency held by the public in 5 years, Decembers of those years when Great Depression happened, 1929 all the way to 33. We got 5 years. We look at December, and currency held by the public, as you could see, except for that first year, or second year if you like, and then it has gone up annually. So what does that mean? Because remember, like, people were not trusting the bank, and they say, oh yeah, the economy was failing, so we need to withdraw money. So more people wanted to hang on to the money as cash. So therefore, you see that number goes up. What about the next one, reserve deposit ratio? Okay, this is an important one, because that's that guy right there, right? And what do you think, like, if the economy is failing, so they want to control the money supply. So what they did was Federal Reserve Bank, that is, as you could see, this number goes up or down. Up, yes. So at the beginning was 7.5%, and then 8.2, 9.5, 10.9, 13.3. So did you remember what happened, like, if you increase that reserve deposit ratio, meaning that the higher the number, let's say from 7.5 all the way to 13.3. So that means the bank will have to set aside more, bigger percentage of reserve. That means we have lesser percentage to be loaned out as computer loans, mortgages, what have you. So that means less chances for them to make money. So money supply should come down in that case. So let's look at the bank reserves here. Bank reserve, as you can see, that number goes up and down a little bit, and then generally on the upward trend, except for 1 year there. And then the most important one we want to look at is the last one, money supply. So, which is that equation right there. So we take this on the numerator, this is in the denominator, and second term over there, and this is your first term. And as you could see, yeah, so what, this is going up, but look, the answer to that at the end, money supply has actually declined annually, right? That's very clear, decline there. So the reason was because even though this is going up, so what? Because this one is not the most important one. Remember, that one will go up linearly, by a linear fashion. But the important one are these two terms, and especially this guy here, this one, because that's your multiplier. So as you can see, as this number goes up, right, it affects the whole equation more. So therefore, it affected the money supply in a downward position. Even though some of this may be up, doesn't matter. That's the powerful engine there, the multiplier. Okay, so that mainly is the point of that whole slide there. Okay, next, so we learned from history, and after the Great Depression in 1934, Federal Reserve Bank came out with something called deposit insurance. And for anybody who works in banks before? I used to have a student who worked in banks. She knew what I was talking about when I mentioned this. This is like a guarantee. Like if you are small depositors, and the way they define small depositors is 100,000 or less money that you have in the bank. That's me. Anybody else? Everybody else. Well, one time I had a student who never raised his hand, and then I asked, and then I found out he's got more than 100,000. Not that I was nosy, but that was. Some people who have more than 100,000, so you're not considered a small depositor. So what this is saying is that, you know, if the banks fail, right, there's another round of this banking failure, what we call banking panic, then if you're a small depositor, that is, if you have 100,000, 100K or less money in the bank, then you are being protected. So if the banks fail, you get your money back under this particular guarantee. They call deposit insurance. They will not lose money even if the bank goes bankrupt. So very nice. So it's like this is there's some sort of security there. And then if you look at history, U.S. has not had significant banking panic since, except in the 80s. Now in the 80s, they were, some of you may have heard about, they're not around anymore. They used to be, maybe they're still around, but very small part. Now S&L stands for Savings and Loans Association. There were a lot of banks in the 80s and named themselves Savings and Loans. And there's one of the category of its own, they had problem. I actually put my money in one of those in the 80s. And of course, there was problem. We didn't know, you know. I mean, people just put their money in, but then they practice something that's called reckless lending and investment. In other words, they don't check your credit as much. Not like today. Today, if you want to take out a car loan, what's the first thing they ask you? Tell me.
Credit report.
I'm sorry?
They ask for your credit report.
Right? Well, before they ask you for credit report, they ask for something else.
Social Security.
That's right. Social Security number, right. You don't ever give it out unless that's your intention. Because with that number, they could do anything. Have you ever noticed if you make calls anytime, you know, they don't, a lot of times they don't ask you for the full number, right? They just ask you for the last 4 digits. Well, that's okay, you know, that's just maybe your PIN number or whatever. But if they ask you for the whole, you make sure that they know, you know what you're doing. So why? That's the first thing they ask, because with that, they could check your credit score. And then, you know, depending on your credit score, if your credit score is not good, then you get a higher interest, which is not good. How would you like it if she sits right next to you, she got 2.5%, and you will offer like 3.9? Because you're not happy, right? But that's saying nothing we can do. It all depends on your credit score, you know. So back then, they didn't have that. They didn't know how to do something like that. They have maybe, but nobody follows it. So now they're getting more and more strict and say, yeah, you got to check all the credit scores, you know, to see if this person is credible before you loan it up, because, you know, who knows? She might not be able to pay it back. So they're very strict now. Anytime you want to take out loans, I just gone through one process. It was like, took me 3 months. 3 months is a long time. It's because it's very hard to get hold of me. But, you know, they check everything. They're very particular about the documents. Like, oh yeah, this is not good enough. We need to have the full year. You know, we need to have the last 3 years of your income tax. Oh, we need to have your W-2 form for the last 2 years. Oh, we need to have the most current pay stubs, you know. And anyway, you say, oh yeah, we have to be careful and check everything. Okay, here it is. So this is how the monetary policy comes in. So again, the main goal, right, is to get rid of that output gap. And now, in the Keynesian monetary policy, we look at it by changing the money supply, which is the equation you saw up there. If you change the money supply, you change the nominal interest rate, and interest rate will affect your PAE. So that's slowly giving you the lane right there. Now, let me draw you a graph, because you may not understand what the second part means. So let's move on to the money market. In the case of money market, you have an equation, well, you have a graph that looks like that. This is the money supply. It is a vertical line because it's usually fixed, assumed to be fixed under the Keynesian monetary policy. And then you have the money demand curve. This is not medical doctors, that's your MD stands for money demand, okay? So this is your little I star, equilibrium interest. And this is your M star, or money stock. So can somebody tell me what is this I stands for? Or we just look at It's interest rate, but what kind of interest rate? Real or nominal? This is nominal. Remember this equation? Real interest rate is the difference between nominal interest rate and, what is this one? Anybody remember? Inflation rate. This was in the earlier chapter. So this I here in your money market graph, remember we look at so many market, capital market, labor market. This is your money market now, and your y-axis, which is your value, is nominal interest, not real interest. Remember earlier we have this savings and investment function? Your y-axis was real interest rate. This one is nominal interest rate. So that's what it means here. If you change the money supply, right, if you move it to the right or left, that vertical line, it will change the nominal interest rate. And then eventually that nominal interest rate would affect your PAE through that equation, which we're gonna look at. How does the Federal Reserve Bank control the nominal interest rate? Very easy. Every day you drive by the bank, you see the bulletin board say, oh, the savings rate today is such and such a percent. Usually it's not very good, right? If it's good, you would brake your car, you drive in and slap down your $10,000 and say, how about it today, I want to open a bank account. Okay. But you know, most people look at the bulletin board and say, oh yuck, not so good. So I better take the money and invest in the stock market or whatever investment, because savings rate is not so good. And that's important, what I just said, because I'll use that example a few times until you get it. Okay, so the Fed cannot set the interest rate and the money supply independently. If you look at this diagram, that's true. Because see, if you want to move the money supply curve, let's say to the right, increase money supply through about 3 means that we'll talk about later, then your interest rate will be lower. And if you move it to the left, interest rate will be higher. So that's how you control it. If you could change your money supply, you could change your interest rate. That's what this is saying. Okay, they are dependent. The nominal interest rate and the money supply. What is the advantage of targeting the interest rate? Number one, the publics are very familiar with it. The fact that I mentioned that you drive by the bank, you see the rate, and you straight away you know what's going on. You know, it's not like fiscal policy, like it's government cutting tax today. Is government spending more money building the road? You don't know that sort of thing because you have to read about it, right? Whereas the interest rate is very close to the public's heart. You drive by, you see it, say, oh yeah, so that's what happened. Okay, so that's what it means here. Okay, the effects of monetary policy exerted to interest rate, which is what I just said. Interest rate can be monitored easily, yes. Okay, so back to this equation, what you see up there, once again, real interest rate is nominal interest rate minus inflation. Let me ask you this question. What is number one Keynesian's assumption about the model? Short run? Okay, what else?
The prices are fixed?
Yes, very good. Prices are fixed. So if prices are fixed, right, meaning you probably don't have inflation, so we could assume that pi to be 0. So in the short run, which is a Keynesian's model anyway, regardless of whether it's monetary or fiscal. So we're looking at the monetary policy now. So if the inflation rate is 0, we could assume that your real interest rate is the same as nominal interest rate in the short run. That makes sense. So that's how they control that nominal interest rate. Inflation rate adjusts slowly to changing economic condition. In fact, in the Keynesian model, we assume it to be 0. We don't touch the price, period. Until the last chapter, which is the next chapter, we say, well, yeah, you cannot hang on to that forever. Because remember our example about the $10,000 cash, right? The excess demand, the expansionary gap. We go to the mall, people see us coming and say, oh, it's time to increase the price. So, you know, you cannot hang on to the policy of not increasing inflation or not using inflation rate. At some point, you have to touch it. But we can safely assume that in the short run, prices do not change. in the short run, but in the long run, we have to change that. In other words, in the long run, you have to face the reality of inflation coming. Therefore, if the Fed changes the nominal interest rate, real interest rate will change by the same amount in the short run, because we assume that pi to be zero in the short run. Okay, this is getting to the heart of that monetary policy now, so this is a time to start paying attention. Okay, again, this is short run impact of federal policy. How do they control the real interest rate? Through that equation, number one. And so some of the assumptions I already talked about, your price does not change much. So changes in money supply can change I and R. Again, first through I, because of that graph there, and then through that equation up there. Okay, so number one, through the relationship between money supply and real nominal interest rate. Number two, through this relationship between real and nominal interest rate, linked by the inflation rate. Okay, so that all that. Okay, never mind. I would draw something here. You might want to take note because this is important. Do this a few times so you will understand. So I'm gonna erase this. Let's see. So we're gonna talk about what are the instruments that the government use for monetary policy. So let's look at that line here. Your R would affect investment and consumption. Okay, remember your PAE equation is C plus I, so P plus T plus NX. So what this is saying is, well, actually this is very simple, straightforward. So all that this is saying is that your interest rate would affect consumption and investment, by the way. And we'll look at how. And so therefore, in the short run, the Federal Reserve Bank is able to affect this spending effectively. But then in the long run, again, we say that P does not change, but, in the long run, we could change the P. And your R is determined by savings and investment. Remember that previous chapter about savings? This is your investment function, this is the savings function. And this is little r, which is real interest rate. So don't get the two diagrams mixed up. For savings and investment function, what we call capital market, your y-axis is real interest rate. Everybody got it? And then earlier, the one that I just drew, I erased now, the y-axis is nominal interest rate, little I. Okay, so the Fed has less effects on spending in the long run, because in the long run, you have to look at this. But nevertheless, let's come back to this point, very important point here. So let me give an example here. So if you were to raise the interest rate, say from 1% to 10%, okay, so this is like, you drive by the bank, you look at it, one day it's 1%, the next day you come back, you saw 10%. So that got your attention, right? What do you do? So you walk into the bank, you slap down your $10,000 and say, I want to put my money in the bank. I say, okay, good. So if you do that, you would have less to invest, you will have less to consume. How will that affect your PAE, up or down? According to this. If C comes down, I comes down, all things being equal, your PAE should up or down?
Down.
Yes. When PAE is down, go back to the balloon of the economy. So, meaning that you have to, the economy gets smaller, right? So that's what it did. So in other words, by raising the interest rate, we call that interest rate up, so PAE is down. So we call this contractionary monetary policy is raising the interest rate. Okay, the other way will be if the interest rate drops from 10% to 1%. So on the third day, you go back to the bank and you saw the interest rate has dropped to 1%. And you say, what happened? It was just yesterday, it was 10%. So what happened? You say, oh yeah, we got a new president and changed the policy overnight. You say, oh wow, well, that really is bad news. So then you take out your $10,000, you say goodbye to the bank, and you go out and invest, go out and consume. So your PAE goes up, all things being equal, because C and I are part of PAE. So the balloon of the economy get bigger when you practice lowering the interest rate. Okay, so we call this expansionary monetary policy. Now, on your test, sometimes in your textbook we use the term loosening, this one right here, loosening of monetary policy. Like you're loosening your belt. If you have a stomach, you eat something, your stomach expands, right? So that's what we call, you have to loosen your belt, because your stomach expands, you know. Your pants get tight, so that's what it is, loosening. Now up here we call it tightening, like you're tightening the belt. If you tighten it, it means you're making it smaller, so that's the same as contractionary monetary policy. So I want you to be familiar with these terms so you know we mean the same thing. Oh, what happened to the balloons? There. So we got bigger. So did everybody copy this down? This is 50 stars, okay? If you get it, you get this. That's it. Your homework is about this. But you have to put in a number. Okay, so let's look at a number very quickly. Federal funds rate is something that commercial bank charges other banks. Sometimes we call interloan banks, interloan rate. Did you know you have buddies in the system? Like BB&T could borrow from Bank of America overnight. And don't charge me so much, you know, I only borrow it for overnight or a week. Short term, very short term. Could be a few hours sometimes. Okay, so that's what your federal funds rate is. It's your interbank. It's interbank. Excuse me. Let's revise this. I meant to write interbank interest rate here, which is the same as federal funds rate. Okay, same term. Because the Fed frequently sets its policy in the form of targeting this FFR. If you read Financial Times or news on TV, they use this term a lot. So this is the one that's closely watched by the financial market. And as you can see historically during the two oil shocks here, it went up. Because remember, according to Fisher effects, your nominal interest rate or interest rate follow closely the inflation rate. Okay. So in other words, the Federal Reserve Bank has some control over FFR, but not 100%. Okay, so this is basically all that I said over there. This whole slide here is what I just put down here. So again, this is saying the same thing. If you're in recessionary gap, which is way, you will want to expand it. So this is when you're in G, okay, this lower part. So when in RG, you have to lower the real interest rate, and then C and I, so P goes up, PAE goes up, so Y goes up. Okay, so when you're in RG, you use expansionary monetary policy, and we already know that from fiscal policy, same thing, except you're using different instruments now. And if you're in EG, too much, you have to apply brake, slow down the economy, and then you raise the interest rate. So everybody pay attention. Because a lot of times students say, oh yeah, you raise the interest rate. Doesn't it mean that balloon get bigger? No, it's the other way, okay? Because you have to think about it this way. If this goes up, right, then I's and C comes down, PAE comes down. So it actually gets smaller. So this is important. This is also 50 stars. Next, let's look at this equation very quickly. Now, this is your consumption function. Somebody tell me now what's different from what we have done so far, please.
Minus 400R.
You got that last term now, because in the past you only have up to here. Now you have negative 400R. And that's your consumption now. Also depends not just on income, but also on real interest rate. And that's why you have this. And now what about I? I is no longer exogenous. Like a nice number I throw out to you, you catch it and say thank you. Not anymore. Because now you can see that, oh, it also have two terms. One is autonomous term, the other one is interest rate. So that's why you have I sub P here. Okay, so that's changed now, a little bit more complicated than before, and that's why I say that assignment, you have to be able to do it before you do the next one, because see, this is more complicated now. Then look at this negative term here, it means that if you increase this by 1%, right, then the interest rate will come down by 1% of 400, which is 4 units, and then 1% of 600, which will be 6 units. And I want you to pay attention that that is negative. Very important. So let's do the algebra very quickly before I let you go. I think we have time to do it. What time is it? 12. Yeah, we could do it. So same thing, do not skip the steps, okay, everybody? So let's do it. Let's start off with PAE. We're going to do it fast. C plus I sub P plus G plus NX. Okay, and then we have C equals to 604. Please write it down with me. Y minus T. And we could substitute T inside. T is 250. Everybody see it? So you should be familiar with how to do it by now. 400R. R is an unknown now. A new unknown. What about I sub P is 250 minus 600R. You have another unknown, so we got two R's here. So next, remember how to do it? This is 1, this is 2, this is 3. So apply 2 and 3 into 1, or sub. Okay, I have to slow down a little bit, so I'm talking so fast. PAE equals to C. What's C? Sub in? Oh, we don't know that whole thing. Okay, 640 plus 0.8y. Let's do this. We expand out the term now. We've done this before. This is 200, right? Don't copy the number down wrong. So this whole thing is your C. Everybody okay with that so far? Very good. Let's move on to I sub P. This is when certain terms get drop off because you're not careful. 600R. So that whole thing is your I. C plus I plus G. 300, very good. And NX is? 20. Okay, so let's do the EC term. The EC term will be this guy. Oh, this guy? Okay, no problem. Because what's that number?
Negative 200.
That's negative 200, very good. And we could do this number, we could do this number. So this 2 already, is 320. Okay, so 320, let's do it up here quickly. 320 plus 640. What's the other one? 250. Don't skip any. And then we have 320. Oh, we already got 320. So tell me what's the number. What you got? Oh, come on, help me out. It's your problem too.
1,010, I believe.
Did you get it? Oh, come on, y'all can do it. You got calculator. Right? 1210, correct? Everybody got that? And then minus 200, what you got?
1,010.
Like that?
Yep.
Okay, you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. And then remember we got this guy, and then we got two guys that we have to be very careful, which is this one right here, negative 600R, and where's the other one? Ooh, did we get drop out? Ooh, hang on. Something's wrong.
Yeah, 400R.
Oh yeah, I dropped off that one. Gee. Okay, I'm sorry. So everybody add this back on. This is a big mistake there. Well, anyway, you just add it back on. Okay, I dropped. See, that's the thing that you have to be very careful. Okay, so you got this two term here. So what's negative 400 and negative 600?
Negative 1,000R.
Okay, very good. Minus negative 1,000R. Everybody okay so far following? Don't forget this guy. Plus 0.8y. Okay, so in your homework problem, you must write it until you get to this stage where you have three, a clean one and the one depends on R, and then finally 0.8y. So when you do, so at the end you will have this, looks like that. So please, everybody must get to this step, and then there's one other step. You say if R equals to, which is my next slide, and then I'll let you go. So if interest rate is equal to 5%, which is 0.05, then you sub it in. Okay, if you sub it in, right, so that will become 1010 minus 1,000. And what's 5% of 1,000?
510. Did I do that right?
No, 50% of 1,000 is 500, yeah, so
Oh,
5% of 100 is 50. So somebody tell me what is 1010 minus 50? Right, so we're back to our old friend, which is 960 plus 0.8 watt. So I think I'll stop right here. So please read ahead of time, so Friday it will be easier for you. I noticed some of you, when you did your homework, you do not write down the PAE. You should, and the equal sign. So this is where we stop. Continue again, so if you're not sure with the algebra, please work on it before Friday.